to make good decisions with data, you have to do a lot of thinking yourself without data first and knowing exactly what it is that you're trying to achieve.
Hi, I'm Cindy Housen, host of The Data Chief. If you've heard me talk about data and AI before, you know that I believe everyone, not just data teams, should be able to get the insights they trust. That's why I'm proud to say that ThoughtSpot sponsors this podcast. ThoughtSpot's agentic analytics platform lets you simply ask a question in natural language and get clear, governed answers right when you need them. No fuss, no waiting. It's why companies like Cisco, Lyft, Hyatt, and Roche count on ThoughtSpot. See what the future of analytics feels like at thoughtspot.com. Welcome to The Data Chief. I'm your host, Cindy Housen. Today, we're joined by Stefano Puntoni, co-director of Wharton Human AI Research and professor at the Wharton School. Stefano is a leading researcher on how AI is changing decision-making, work, and society. In this episode, we'll explore why data and AI insights so often fail to translate into action, and how psychological threat and change management shape the success of AI inside organizations. Stefano, welcome to The Data Chief.
Thank you for having me, Cindy. Great to be here.
Yeah, and where in the world is here today, Stefano?
I'm in Philadelphia in my office at the Wharton School.
Philadelphia, just a little bit north of me, but I feel like I should ask you, what is your favorite town or city in Italy?
In Italy, I'd say Florence. I grew up in Tuscany, so I'm a bit biased.
Yes. Yeah. No, Tuscany is beautiful. Beautiful. It is perhaps one of my favorite countries to go visit in the world.
Yeah,
Been there many times.
I recommend it to everybody for vacation. It's not, Tuscany is not the best place maybe for an AI professor, and that's I think the US is a lot more exciting that way. But in terms of enjoying life and food and wine is great.
Oh, for sure. The wine. I'm picturing a village in Montalcino, atop a hill. Yes, you'll have to come visit me in Lewis, and we will open this huge bottle of Brunello. That would be fun. So, Stefano, you are a prolific writer, researcher. You're educating executives and youth on how AI is changing the world. I want to ask you about a point that really stuck with me, though, in one of your books, Decision-Driven Analytics, and how sometimes more data does not lead to better decisions. Why is that?
I think that we have this almost like instinctive reaction that when we see intelligent algorithms and amazing data systems, we take them almost as an excuse for thinking less. Because the machine is not smart, then we can rely on them for insights. We don't need to think as hard. And I think that's it's a common fallacy, but I think it's a bad one. Because in a way, the smarter the machines, the smarter we've got to be. And so I advise everybody that I think to make good decisions with data, you have to do a lot of thinking yourself without data first and knowing exactly what it is that you're trying to achieve, framing the problem, clarifying alternative courses of action. How do you even know what success looks like here? And why are you doing it in the first place? So I think a lot of these questions are not very well thought through in a lot of data analytics programs, and that ends up often being an issue because there is a chasm being created between the decision makers, the subject matter experts, the people who are accountable for decisions like brand managers, product managers, people like that. And on the other hand, the technical function, the analyst, the AI engineers, and people who maybe lack domain expertise, but they really have deep expertise on the tools. I think not having that good communication, not knowing why we're doing this, exactly what we're looking for, then leads these analytics to be not useful.
Yeah, so that's interesting. It's almost like you're saying the pre-work is more important or equally important as the insights themselves.
Yeah, in a way, it's like, you get what you put into. So if you thought very carefully about what you're doing and why, it's much more likely it's going to be helpful than if you were not. Now, to be clear, there's a lot of insight that can be gained using just data mining and exploratory analysis just to see what you find in there. People can learn from data. But a lot of the times, that's not what you're trying to do. You're trying to know, for example, whether this ad is better than that ad, or whether this target audience will appreciate this feature, or whether, whatever it might be. And so in that case, you have to have thought through exactly what are the options, how do we know which option is best, and what kind of data do we need in order to answer that question. And that is basically more of a conceptual challenge. It's not a data challenge. So it becomes a data challenge eventually, but I think first you need to have done a lot of thought. And I think too many companies basically, see the data as a value in itself, while data is just a means to an end.
Yeah. And so is that getting worse with AI? You've written and researched about cognitive offloading. Are we offloading even more of that thinking to AI, or how do you think we're doing here?
Yeah, and I think it can actually, the progress in technology almost paradoxically can exacerbate the problem in two ways. I think the first one is just like I mentioned before, as the machine gets smarter and smarter, we might over-rely on it. You mentioned this notion of cognitive offloading. I think something that many people worry about. Mm-hmm. And, it's only natural. We are biological systems, so we are hardwired for energy conservation. If we're given a chance to save energy and be lazy, we will do it. So you can count on that. And second, the technology is getting so advanced and also complex that it's going to take now a lot of technical know-how to fully understand what it is doing. And so you have this, threat almost for a lot of decision makers saying, I don't understand this. I don't know what it is. I have the technical people taking care of it, and it's just not for me. And I think that's not the right answer. I don't think the point would be for the decision maker to become an expert on data analytics. Everybody has their own competence, and there should be division of labor, but they need to be involved so that we make sure that those analytics efforts are functional to whatever goal the company has. Because the people who ultimately account who will make the decisions are those who know best, the lay of the land and what it is we're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, for sure. And I, as somebody who's worked at the intersection of data and analytics for 30 years now, I believe that the closer we put the data and the insights to the person who actually has to make the decision, the better the outcomes will be, because they know what they're looking for, or they have more hypotheses than, let's say, the order taker, data analyst, dashboard developer. So if you think about how potentially game-changing conversational AI can be in bringing the data closer to these decision makers, you've discovered some interesting observations. Can you share that with us?
Yeah, many things happy to talk about in this space. I think one thing you mentioned, I think it's interesting what you're saying here. I think conversational AI, it's a device that you can use to bring decision makers closer to the data. And I think that's a deep insight if you think about it, because as technology gets more complicated, the statistical models get more sophisticated, finding the data and managing the data across different systems become more complicated. Decision makers naturally are relying more and more on analysts and technical people to support that decision making. But that means that there's this growing chasm I was just talking about before between decision makers and the data. And what AI can do, to some extent, turn the analytics function into something that looks much more like a self-serve kind of function, where for at least a lot of things, I'm not saying everything, and certainly there's a lot of roles for analysts to contribute. But for a lot of things, you can now have a manager who has maybe a hunch or maybe just a curiosity and can explore it using data in a way that before maybe they would not have done it, because now they need to submit a query to the analytics department and someone has to basically respond, and they'll get back to you, and then they wait 2 days, and then you get your crosstab or your graph or table or whatever it is that you are trying to get. And now you say, I have an idea. I think that basically this customer segment might actually be more sensitive to this than we've given it credit to or whatever. Then, maybe you think, we've got the data because we ran the campaign or because we've got that vendor or whatever it might be. And then just go on conversational AI tool and pull that data and test that hypothesis right away instead of, having a... So in a way you can say, and this is a more general point about innovation in organizations, I think one big role of AI in organizations is to lower the cost of action. Basically making it easier. In many situations where you have a balance between cost and benefit and say there is some uncertainty about the benefit of trying something or the likelihood that something will work. And so now sometimes I'll be on the fence and say, is it worth my time? Is it worth investment? Do I do it? Do I not do it? Maybe the payoff is not going to be as big, or maybe the likelihood of it succeeding is too low, and so you don't do it. And now you've got AI, so testing, analysis, even implementation is so much easier and faster that it tips over the balance to action. And I say, you know what, let me try it. And maybe it is, low probability, but you do enough of them, you're going to hit the winner. So I think in terms of innovation, it's not just the data analytics function. I think it's everything, new product development, customer experience, a lot of different things.
And which ads, as you work at the intersection of marketing as well, it's which ads will work, which audiences and personas do we target? How do we even think about segmentation? So you had an interesting point that it lowers the cost to action. I think it gets us beyond that analysis paralysis, or just flying blind because you can't get to the data. So clearly, leaders are excited about this, but sometimes workers are less excited. Tell us what the gap is here.
Yeah, so that's something that we see in our data. We run every year a Gen AI adoption tracker, and we do see that across the levels in the organizational hierarchy, you see marked differences in the way that people feel about AI, both in general and in terms of their own firm's efforts. And this kind of divide has been demonstrated in other data sets, so I think it's pretty robust. And the pattern is this one. People at the top of the organization tend to be very bullish about AI. They see it as a core competence to be developed, a massive accelerator of lots of things that we care about, including, ultimately the bottom line. At the same time, people further down the organization feel threatened by this technology because it holds the promise of transforming organizational functions, affects the value of skills very much. And that's a big deal. You invest a decade and lots of, basically blood and treasure to develop a set of skills. And now there are questions as to the value of those skills moving forward. And I think leaders are not helping, because a lot of the times when leaders talk about AI to the press in quarterly earning announcements or press releases or whatever, typically the shape of that conversation is very much focused on productivity. And productivity is code word for headcount reduction in the years of a lot of workers. And so now, on the one hand, I hear this conversation inside where the leaders are sending us all these memos saying, you've got to do this, you've got to do that, you've got to get on board with this, you've got to love it. And on the other hand, when they speak outside to investors, they basically they tell them we're going to use AI to fire lots of people. And then why should you be surprised? Then people inside are skeptical and look at this more with anxiety than with excitement. I think it's only normal.
Yeah, for sure. And listen, mainstream media does not help here. I think about the Wall Street Journal article early in the year, use AI or be fired. Every week we're seeing headlines about mass reductions. So I don't think these fears are misplaced. And yet at the same time, your research is showing that some people will outright sabotage adoption of AI for the good of the company because they go into self-preservation mode. So how should leaders and even workers, if I am a marketing campaign manager, how should I be rethinking my role with AI?
I think you can think about it from both perspectives, or leadership and say management of the workers who implement the programs. There's a lot of interesting things to talk about here, but just to sketch a couple. From the point of view of the leaders, I think you've got to give very careful thought to how do you harvest the energy of the organization. you need basically vision and investment from the top. The leaders need to know why we're doing AI. AI is not a strategy. AI is just a tool. So what is it that we're trying to achieve? We need to make available the resources and, whether those are technical support, compliance, and safety, whatever it might be, and to make those tools available to people across the organization. And then it needs to bring basically energy and vision and communicate authentically about, the path ahead. Honestly, too, because obviously there might be also uncomfortable conversations to be had, but basically be transparent and be genuine. And on the other hand, that's not enough, because you also need energy from the bottom. The people at the center don't know how a particular job is going to be impacted potentially by the AI. Only the people doing that job and the people that right above them know that. And so how do we, either you bring in outside consultants and they do that for you, or you're going to involve people in the organization to co-create a template or a formula to make this work. And nobody knows how to make it work. And the way that it works for one organization might actually end up being quite different from the way it works in a next organization, because of differences in culture, scale, assets, capabilities, and whatever. And so you need somehow to develop AI programs that meet in the middle, where you've got energy from the bottom and energy for the top, and somehow we make it all work. If you have only energy from the bottom, leadership is disengaged, they lack investment and vision. You're going to have lots of people who experiment with AI because they'll see the value in making the jobs better or easier. But there's going to be a lot of fragmentation, a lot of liabilities and risk potentially, where people are doing lots of stuff without, support and supervision. And that is probably not going to work very well for the organization overall. If you do only things at the top and you're like a baby shoveling down the throat of people, that's not going to work either, because half of your people want a program to fail, it will fail. There's nothing you can do about that. So somehow you need to find a balance between the two.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that most surprised me in your research is the realization that somebody is more resistant to adopting AI if it threatens their identity. And you gave a perfect example, unwittingly, but I love my Jura coffee maker, Swiss coffee maker, because I'm not a barista. And so just pressing a button and having it filter the water, make a perfect cup of espresso, I'm happy to offload that to a machine, to AI. But if my identity is as a CDAO whisperer or a trusted advisor or even a dashboard developer, and now you're going to have AI replace that part of my identity, it would be pretty soul crushing. So what are some of the techniques that you recommend that leaders address this identity equation of AI?
Yeah, so I was just mentioning before the perspective from the top. How do I understand deployment so that I basically channel energy from both the floor and the ceiling kind of thing? And now you can turn it around and say, if I'm a worker, I see this technology coming up, and the trajectory of the technology is still uncertain. We don't know where it ends, but it's obviously still getting better every day. And so we should expect that to be the case for the time being. And so when you look at that trajectory, for many people, there is a concern about, what does it mean for me? What does it mean to be that kind of person? Will we even have that kind of person in our organization in the future? And so I think basically as a professional, you were mentioning now people in the data space, but I think this is a threat to lots of different types of people. If you're an advertising copywriter, if you are an HR manager, if you are an accountant, if you are a financial analyst, whatever, consultant, whatever. There's so many different professions that are going to be transformed by AI. I think many of them will not go away. They're just going to change. And so the question is, do you understand the direction of travel? And hiding your head under the sand is not going to make it go away. You can think about it from the point of view of the carrot to the stick and say, I think adopting this technology, learning what it means from your job function, your job specs, and basically your career trajectory moving forward is going to be crucial to actually making progress. And so, get excited about it, because I think now it's a moment where many things are in play. And if you can be a leader in helping that change management process and transformation, you have amazing opportunities ahead of you, I think. On the side of the stick, so to speak, instead, is if you're just pretending this thing is not there, right over you. So you basically have to somehow learn to adapt. There's many things that people can do. One is, we call it direct resolution, where you tackle the challenge head on. You basically upskill yourself so that you make yourself the best possible complement to this technology. But you don't want to be the substitute to the technology, because if that is what you do, then there's no future. But if you're a complement, actually that technology might be a multiplier of your productivity. And in many situations, we know, based on economic principles, that if you have a productive asset just got more productive, you want to use more of it, not less. And so there'll be more opportunities for you. And so things like, do you know how to vibe code? Do you know how to, leverage these tools for whatever workflow? Can you actually think carefully about how you would re-engineer completely a workflow around this and lead that change? That's direct resolution. Then you have something we call fluid compensation. And that one basically means to say, okay, there are a bunch of tasks and skills involved in this job, in this space. And I can see that AI is basically making great strides towards taking over some of those. What I need to do is to pivot and figure out which ones are not being taken over by AI and make sure that I'm as good as possible at those. So imagine a marketing manager, maybe in B2B, and they were spending a lot of time doing content marketing. And now they realize that a lot of SEO or writing, content marketing kind of tasks are going to be automated. What do I do? Well, now the question shifts from writing the content to what content needs to be written. And so now you could decide, okay, I'm going to pivot to strategy and say, my goal is going to be not that of creating content, but that of orchestrating a swarm of agents. I'm going to do lots of stuff around content and be successful that way. So the two things can be related, but I think they'll be different in mindset. One is basically, okay, I'm going to be successful by using the tool and I learn the skills I need in order to do that. The other one is to say, I figure out a space that is still valuable moving forward and where AI is not going to be leading for whatever reason, and I'm going to just take that space for me. And so those are two different approaches, but I think workers have to find their own way, whatever that may be. And that requires some thinking and probably experimentation too.
Yeah, and I think that first strategy that you described, rather than seeing AI as replacing you, how can it make you better? And what is the reality there? Is it making you better or is it replacing you? And then gravitating towards the skills that are not easily replaceable.
Technology is always having a combination of replacement and enhancement. It's going to make some skills more valuable and more productive, and it's going to make some skills less valuable and maybe even obsolete. And that is fine. It's always the case. It's always been the case from whatever technology you can think of. The problem is not really that one. The problem is that now we have a technology that is so advanced in its ability to produce high order thinking and outputs that is carving out a big chunk potentially of a space of activity. And so finding what humans can contribute, I think there's lots that can contribute, but we don't have a blueprint. We are making it up as we go along.
We don't have a blueprint because it's so new and more disruptive and transformational than past innovation waves. You do have a framework, though, that you wrote about in one of your articles, and we will link to several of your articles in the show notes. Tell us about the AWARE framework.
Yeah, so that AWARE framework is an attempt to help leaders understand how to deal with the feelings of threat that you were mentioning before, especially identity threat. And what we do is to say, well, taking a step back, if you think about what kind of threat AI can trigger in workers. One, we already discussed, a threat to the value of skills, to one's role and status in a company, maybe a threat to competence. Then you've got the threat to autonomy. I feel now put in, we call it an algorithmic cage, where basically you feel that your range of actions is limited because you got used this tool who is basically dictating large chunk of what is to be done in a workflow. And then you have threats to relatedness, where you might find that this technology entering the firm has some kind of alienating effects. And now I don't talk to a person anymore. I only talk to this AI, or AI has been basically thrown at me in a way that makes me feel like not being valued by the company. So I feel detached from my colleagues and my superiors. So there could be these threats to different elements of our well-being, so to speak. If you are a leader, then what do you do? Well, you basically want to have a set of steps that enable you to to monitor and anticipate and basically deal with this kind of like potentially aversive psychological reactions that workers are experiencing as you roll out AI. And so the aware framework, every letter is basically a verb, like align, watch, and so forth, where basically you say, okay, do I understand how my AI deployment is make them feel and think? Can I anticipate who in my organization is going to be experience especially strong feelings of threat and why? And if they do experience that, what kind of coping strategy, what kind of reactions is this likely to trigger? And can I devise programs that maximize the likelihood that those coping strategies will result in positive action rather than negative maladaptive action, like, active sabotage on AI program, disengagement, escapism, or some kind of negative reaction, negative from both the standpoint of the individual worker, but also the organization. And so in that paper that is in Harvard Business Review, we basically sketch a set of steps building off this work in psychology and try to provide some advice as to how you can pair a technical deployment track with a human deployment track, where you've got your CTOs, your CDOs, CIOs working with leadership to basically figure out the data and the cybersecurity and the vendor contracts and the financials around it, and basically, the privacy, whatever it might be, compliance, all of that. And that is basically absolutely central to making it work. And so you might hire some kind of tech outsourcing consultants or whatever, and basically get that done. But that's not enough. You need to completely complete the program by adding a more HR-led maybe, or I don't know how this can work out in practice. Maybe it's fitting within each function, I'm not sure. But basically a program that would consider those psychological issues we talked about and try to make sure that, this is going to be seen by workers as a win rather than a loss. And if they see it as something that's going to hurt them, they're going to react negatively to it in all kinds of ways. If they see it as something that is exciting and potentially empowering, then I think it's going to double the likelihood, the energy and the power, like we talked about before. This is how you liberate the energy of the organization. And maybe not everybody will get on board. And then you have to deal with that. But maybe reallocating some roles, and maybe some people just can't adapt to the new system, where, there will be some difficulties there, I'm sure. But basically, I think a lot of people can be brought along with the right systems, I think.
For sure. Thank you for that framework, Stefano. One of the other areas that you and I agree on is the importance of AI literacy. And I have said that in the boardroom or in the leadership team, that AI literacy there most determines the degree that organizations will be successful, impactful with it. You also teach a course on AI in society, so see it as a life skill. What do you think real AI literacy looks like? What can we do better here?
I think it's a bit of a hard question, because I don't know that I don't really know the answer right now. I think certainly there are a few things that we all ought to be doing. One is to just get acquainted with the technology, use it. I mean, there are many people who have maybe an account with ChatGPT or Claude or some other system like that, either through a private account or through something made available by the company. A lot of them have, let's say, a contract with Microsoft to have access to Copilot or whatever it might be. But the reality is that many people use it sometimes, but they haven't quite developed a muscle where their instinctive reaction is to see how that technology can help them do the job better and faster. And so I think for many people, it's just change management. I mean, it's hard to rewire people's brain. You've done a job for 10, 20 years, and now you're asking to pause and think every time you're doing something. You can do it instinctively, quickly, and say, can I get help from this technology? It's not obvious. I mean, it's quite complex process of change. But just practicing and getting it, inviting it to everything you do. This is what my colleague Ita Molek is always advising people to say. Just ask the question, would you be able to do it? How well, and how can I support, and how can we work together? Give it a shot, and sometimes it will work amazingly well, and you think, wow, I found a great way to do it better and save time. Other times you'll find not great, and actually, I want to keep doing it the way I was doing it, which is also fine. But in that case, go back to it 6 months later, because it's moving very fast. So things that I was testing months ago and I wasn't able to do very well, I'm able now to do very well. And so this is a moving target for sure. So that's one, just like, have the right mindset, just try it and use it and make sure you have these accounts and you just do it for lots of different things. Maybe even start from a hobby and see how you can create maybe Vibe Covenant to help this youth group, or maybe develop something that helps you be a better musician, artist, cook, or whatever.
Sommelier.
Sommelier, exactly. Whatever it might be. And just see how that works and use it as an entry point. I think that's but then beyond that, I think we ought to think carefully also about more specialized use than just a general productivity tool. We'll all be benefiting when we do a deck, when we write an email, when we try to understand a complex report. It can help all of us. But I think this technology will also have the ability to be developed into specialized applications that are relevant to a particular function. This could be something you do in-house through kind of internal R&D, and maybe lots of prototyping nowadays can be done with vibe coding by people in the function that don't have technical skills, just to see how this might work. And then, to scale it and put it in production might be a different game, but I think you can go quite far. And, finding out all those ways in which you can help, engineering and new product development and finance and, all the functions within a company. I think that's something that's going to have to rest with the people who know that function best. So that's another track where you have to basically just think about these specialized applications that might require a degree of investment, some testing, some development.
Yeah. So trying it, I think, is important. You mentioned, Stefano, change management, and a data point from an AWS survey in 2025, only 14% of organizations had a formal change management program. Now, the prediction is that we will do better in 2026, that a full 3/4 will have a change management program in 2026. I guess my first question is, do you agree with this prediction, or too optimistic, or what do you think?
I don't know about the point estimate, but the direction of travel is the right one. Indeed, we'll see more and more companies realizing that those pilots and those efforts are not leading to the returns that the leaders were hoping for because of all these resistance factors that we discussed. Actually, that's exactly what I was advocating just a minute ago, right? To pair this technical track with a human track and say, you can call it whatever, change management is basically what it is. And so whenever you start saying I'm making investments in Gen AI, you can just throw that money there and just hope it kind of blossoms. You basically have to think carefully about deployment and change management. So I think it's such an obvious thing, but I think the problem is that technology is almost like taking all the oxygen from the room. There's so much attention and urgency around the tech itself that we often forget the people around it. And I think that's something that we are learning to correct, because you do see that a lot of these programs don't work out if they're not, embedded within some kind of change management program. But I'm excited to see what 2026 is gonna look like from that standpoint.
Yeah, you say it's obvious, but I would challenge you on that. I think it may be obvious, but no one person owns it. It's not an HR problem. It's not a CEO problem. It's not a CDAO problem. And so, as one leader said to me, it's easier to replace 25-year-old tech than to replace 25-year-old mindsets. So I think we avoid the difficult or avoid when it is multifaceted.
So the fact that the problem is obvious doesn't mean that it's easily solved. I agree with
Yes. Yeah, fair. All right. We've covered so much, Stefano. If you had one last bit of advice to data and AI leaders and CIOs on scaling AI responsibly, what would that be?
Maybe one thing we haven't talked about, which you just made me think about, is to think about how do you lead that change management project. And I think one thing that we see in our data is that companies increasingly have a role called the Chief AI Officer. And in about half of the instances in our data, we find that this is a bit of a rebranding of an existing role, oftentimes CDO, CIO. And so imagine there, if you are a Chief Information Officer, you add an A to the title, and now everybody thinks you're cool. That's one thing. And so that's in a way, it's more like kind of branding. But I don't want to dismiss it as an important thing, because I think for many knowledge-driven organizations, signaling that we are leading this is actually important for outside clients or whatever.
Yeah.
But then you have also about half of these new roles altogether. And I think that it's an interesting idea that many companies, I don't say that they should do it, but I think they should consider whether that's the way to do it, and maybe they come up with a different one. But I think it's maybe an opportunity to reflect a little bit on what's best in order to manage this. Would you then have a person who is basically tasked with being the board level accountability person? So I now have someone in the board whose job is to make this work. And I think that is probably going to solve some of the issues that you were pointing out, Cindy, when you were talking about fragmentation and nobody, doing their own thing and doesn't amount to anything. And so that's one issue this kind of accountability can help with. The other one is the CTO will have to take care of the technical stuff. And there's a lot to take care of. And you can't expect the CTO to go to the functions and say, this is how it can help marketing, payroll, whatever. That is something that is not, it's not fair to expect a CTO to have to do that. You basically need to have someone else who is taking the technology from the center and brings it out to the functions. And maybe the CAIO role can be that person who supports every function in making it work in that function. And in that sense, you can see the CAIO role basically as a change management job. Perhaps it's not a technical person at all. It's just a person who really understands change management and has a good holistic view of the business.
Yes.
That's basically one idea that I think a lot of companies will benefit from.
No, I like this idea in the debate. I resist rebranding. I'm like, come on, everyone should have part of the AI, but maybe it is a necessary signal for right now. I think that's a really good point. Stefano.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, that could be a transitional thing. I mean, this thing, we see, for example, in our education, we're adding a lot of AI courses. We even launched an AI major for our MBA program. We were the first peer school to do that.
Oh,
and
the
internal discussion was a little bit about why should we have an AI major? Everything is going to be AI first in a way. And I completely agree with that. But just like, with digital and maybe international business a decade earlier, every way you would change in organizations need to be spearheaded somehow by some people. So I think that an AI major makes sense today. A CAIO can make sense today. That doesn't mean we're still going to have it 10 years from now, right? So that may be just a conjuncture. And as we moved on and really understood how this technology is going to play out, then we don't need that anymore because everything is AI in some shape or form. But I think it's going to take us a decade or two. I don't think it's going to be an 18-month thing like a lot of people in tech predict.
Yeah, I think it's moving fast, but the impact on society and roles will take longer. Okay, so now you have an AI major as part of the MBA program, which I think is exactly where it belongs. As I said earlier, you make me want to go back to school. So, Stefano, we've covered a lot of ground. Let's shift to a fun lightning round. What do you do outside of work when you're not in the world of AI?
The usual thing. I love food and love traveling, love spending time with my family. One thing that I do, and maybe that's kind of interesting to people, is to carve out time for epiphany. I try to think, whether it is a long run or some meditative moment, or maybe just walking in nature, something that can help my brain come up with ideas. And I think in a world where things are rushing so quickly, I think we'll all benefit from having moments for pause, because I think those pauses are important for well-being, but they're also important for ideation and creativity.
For sure. So I'm picturing you jogging along the Schuylkill River, but I think you should come down to Rehoboth along Gordon's Pond.
I have been running over there once. It's a beautiful place. Yes.
It is. It is. How about someone, famous or not, who inspires you?
Well, I'll say that there are many really interesting people in the social sciences now helping society navigate the AI transformation. We hear so much from the tech sector, obviously, and a lot of very exciting voices and important authoritative voices in that world. But I think I'll say pay attention to social scientists, because this revolution is now as much a technical challenge as it is a social challenge as it is a technical challenge. So colleagues like mine, like Ida Molek or Eric Bjornson at Stanford, or a whole host of interesting people who are basically helping us understand what we can do with this.
Yeah, and as you say that, I was reflecting on some of the customers that I have the privilege of working with, and they are different titles. But what I find interesting is that they do have a background in behavioral science or psychology. And it's almost like, have they met the magic of combining the tech with the human elements, why they've been able to be so successful in their orgs? So I do think that's important. All right, Stefano, I've asked all the questions. You get to choose the last one, depending on your mood in the moment. Either what are you most grateful for, maybe beyond the obvious of health and family, or what is an accomplishment from the last week that you are most proud of?
I'll maybe take the first one because I think it's maybe more relevant to everybody. And I think there is a lot of fear when it comes to change in the world, and some of it is very justified because the world is somewhat in turmoil, both in terms of geopolitics and democracy and stability. So there's a lot of processes that are a little scary. At the same time, I think we are so lucky to be alive. I mean, it's an incredible time. I just play with this technology, and I just can't believe what it can do. And so I understand the threat, I understand the fear, and there is, a lot of reasons to be worried, but there is so much to be excited to. And I would like to balance that conversation and say, don't look at this as something that you lose from. Look at this as something you can gain enormous amounts from.
What a beautiful thought, Stefano. Thank you so much for the work you do and for being on the Data Chief podcast.
Thank you for having me. Great to be here with you.